Chapter 37. Post. It was 7:40 a.m. when Calvin approached the hard front with the Amazon parcel under his arm and a mailbag slung over his back. Savis and Wheels crouched in a stairwell less than 10 meters away, with silenced handguns in holsters under their jackets. James and Bruce were behind them, leather gloves over their hands and black balaclavas ready to pull over their faces before they moved in. Sasha was in the next block watching through the surveillance cameras. As the boss of the Mad Dogs, he left most of the dirty work to his younger deputies. Salty beads streaked down Calvin's forehead as he stood at the reinforced door. He could hear a couple speaking inside as he jammed his thumb on the doorbell for a second time. "Parcel!" Calvin shouted. "I know you're there, but I ain't got all day." A couple of bolts slid off and the door opened a few centimeters, still secured by a heavy chain. The instant it moved, Savis and his 3 companions jumped out of the stairwell and began moving along the balcony towards the flat. The woman behind the door was in a state, with a duvet wrapped around her shoulders and a yellow muck seeping from an infected eyeball. "Hey," the woman yawned, as Calvin passed a clipboard and biro through the doorway. Then she screamed back down the hallway. "More of your poxy books, Tyler! How come it's not your ass I see moving out of bed?" As the woman scrawled her name in a white box, Calvin slipped a 60,000-volt cattle prod out of his back pocket and jammed it into her belly. She flew away from the door, convulsing as she collapsed backwards into a rack of coats hanging on the wall. Outside, Wheels pulled down his balaclava and ran forwards, holding a giant pair of bolt croppers. Calvin pushed his trainer against the door to make the chain tight, and Wheels cut it. Calvin didn't have body armor or a gun, and the woman had seen his face, so he backed off and let the other 4 take care of business. A woman shouted as Savis and Wheels charged into the living room, waving their guns. As planned, James raced on down the hallway and burst into the main bedroom, while Bruce pinned the woman to the hallway floor, locking her arms behind her back with disposable cuffs and forcing a rubber gag into her mouth. A smell hit James as the bedroom door came open, a mixture of urine and old sweat that made him glad he hadn't eaten breakfast. After weeks of surveillance, James was certain that they'd seen everyone come and go enough times to know exactly who was inside. But he was staggered to find a small boy staring out from between the wall and a chest of drawers. He looked about 5, but he had a dummy in his mouth and clearly hadn't seen bathwater in weeks. James was so appalled by the sad little figure that he lost concentration, allowing the man in the bed to reach under the mattress and grab a knife. But James ripped the Glock out of its holster and held it in the air. "Put that down before I blow your head off," James said strictly. He looked back when he heard a row breaking out in the hallway directly behind him. One of the dealers had tried making a sprint out of the second bedroom, but he'd clattered into Bruce, who'd taken him down with a palm thrust hard into his solar plexus. "Get everyone tied and bring him in here," Savis shouted from the living room. "Then we'll search for the gear." "Put this in your mouth and pull the strap behind your head," James ordered, as he grabbed a rubber gag out of his pocket and threw it onto the bed. The man did what he was told. "Now your wrists," James said, putting the gun to the man's head as he looped plastic cuffs over his hands and pulled them tight. All this time, the filthy little lad stared dumbly. "All right, mate," James said, trying to be as reassuring as a masked man holding a gun can be. Don't be scared. We're not going to hurt you." The living room smelled funky, though nothing like as bad as the bedroom. There were dirty cups piled everywhere, the ashtrays were stacked, and there were about 100 PlayStation games and DVDs in a mound near the TV, most of them out of their boxes. It was a small space, and it got even smaller with 3 gagged men on the sofa, 2 gagged women on the floor, and the little boy standing in the corner with his bony legs crossed. James and Bruce stood guard in the living room while Savis and Wheels tore the other rooms apart, searching for drugs and money. "Why don't you get some toys to play with?" James said gently, concerned that traumatizing a 5-year-old with a gun would be yet another item on the long list of things that would keep him out of heaven. But the boy didn't move. James noticed a couple of plastic cars jammed under the edge of the sofa, and he kicked them across the carpet. After a couple of seconds, the boy kicked them back. He seemed starved of attention, and after the car had been kicked back and forth a couple of times, the little lad smiled and came over towards James. "Can I hold your gun?" he asked. James looked down at the matted hair and tried not to gag as he breathed the lad's smell. There were welts on the back of his arms where he'd been whipped. The sight made James boil. "It's only for grown-ups," James said as he reached down his pocket. "But I've got some chocolate eclairs." James was going to pull out one sweet, but when he saw the little boy's face light up, he gave him the whole packet. The lad scrambled back into his corner and crammed 2 toffees in his mouth. "Take it easy," James said. "You'll choke." But the boy took the warning as a threat, and he crouched down nervously, clutching the sweets to his chest and primed for an explosion of tears. "Check this out, kids," Wheels boomed as he struggled into the room with a large backpack. He unzipped it and pulled back the flap, unveiling bags filled with powdered cocaine and honeycomb-like bricks of crack. Bruce's eyes were bulging. "How much is that lot worth?" Wheels shrugged. "Ain't had time to weigh it, but it's got to be at least 70 grand. Savis looked at his watch as he strode into the room. "Looks like we're all secured. Is everyone behaving themselves in here?" "No problems," James said. "Hey, you've got some sweets," Savis said, smiling at the boy in the corner. "What's your name?" But the lad was too shy to answer. Savis shook his head in disgust as he stepped towards the 2 women. "Which one of you junky bitches is his mother?" he asked angrily. Neither woman could speak with the gags in their mouth, and neither nodded. So Savis picked the one on the left at random. He grabbed her by the chin and bashed her head against the wall. "Give him a bath," Savis said as he stepped back, shaking his head in disgust. "How can you let him walk around in that state?" Then he looked over at Bruce and pulled a tenner out of his pocket. "We're going to have to wait here a couple of hours. I've put the kettle on, but I'm not eating anything out of that filthy kitchen. Would you nip down to the cafe across the street and get the bacon sarnies in?"